It is my contention that that ancient Minoan rite was what later evolved into the Rites of Eleusis. Hello my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance, it's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, and this is the Rites of Eleusis, ergot, or opium. One of the interesting things about modern psychedelic culture is that as soon as the psychedelic masses sort of latch onto an idea, it becomes very difficult to sort of pry ourselves away from that idea, whether there is any evidence to support the idea or not. And despite all the mind expansion that we claim happens, it proves very difficult to challenge these ideas and, dare I say, even attempt to overturn them, and perhaps replace it with something a little bit more evidence-based. The historical datum with which we shall wrestle today has to do with the supposed psychedelic beverage of the ancient Athenians, the kykeon drunk during the Rites of Eleusis. Most people interested in psychedelic history and culture will claim that it was ergot, the natural precursor for LSD, which served as the active ingredient, the entheogenic additive, so to speak, of the kykeon. They will often point to books like The Road to Eleusis by Wasson, Hofmann, and Ruck, or the more recent The Immortality Key by Brian Muraresku. Perhaps most interesting, neither one of those books actually offers any evidence whatsoever that ergot was the active ingredient in the kykeon. But because of how culture sort of moves and the way memes sort of spread really bad information, it is now almost impossible to convince anybody that ergot was not present at Eleusis, despite the fact that there is literally no evidence that it was ever used there at all. So, was the kykeon psychedelic or entheogenic in some way? And if so, was ergot the active ingredient? Those are the questions I will try to answer in this video. Before we dig into this, if you're into this kind of content, please give this video a like and a share and subscribe to the channel. It's probably best that I lay out a few facts about the Rites of Eleusis so that we stay together as we move through the mystery. The short of the myth that founded the rites goes in this wise. Persephone, daughter of the grain goddess Demeter, was strolling along a field and picked a flower called the narcissus. At that moment, Hades seizes Persephone and drags her into the underworld, where she must live for part of the year. During the Rites of Eleusis, the initiates would drink the kykeon and have a vision of Persephone rising from the dead. This was supposed to instill some kind of secret knowledge about the cycles of life and death. Now that we have the basics down, let's see how deep we can go. The first thing I need to address is that both books, The Road to Eleusis and The Immortality Key, and I don't think the authors meant to do this, but they very much misrepresent what a mystery religion was in the ancient world. As Muraresku writes on page 35 of The Immortality Key, the inviolable secrecy surrounding the mysteries of Eleusis had everything to do with protecting the psychedelic recipe. To be clear, here Muraresku is referring to the theories of the authors of The Road to Eleusis, being Wasson, Hofmann, and Ruck. However, there is nothing in The Immortality Key that would indicate that Muraresku disagrees with this. Thing is, the nature of a drug used in the ancient world has absolutely nothing to do with putting the mystery in a mystery religion. Much as it might be hard for us to sort of consider, a mystery religion in the ancient world had nothing to do with questions and everything to do with explanations. Or rather, the explanations were just as important as the questions. Think of it this way. If the question was something like, why does it rain? The mystery religion served as a way of answering that question. And while we can only speculate, the mystery of Eleusis had to do with what I mentioned a moment ago, which was the occult nature of birth, life, death, and the cosmic cycles that tie it all together. To boil ancient mysteries down to what kind of drug was used is unbelievably anachronistic and somewhat shallow, and does not pay any heed or credence to what ancient peoples were actually like. For those unfamiliar with the word I just used, anachronism, I'll just clear up real quick. An anachronism is when we throw a modern idea onto the past in a time and place where that idea never existed. Now, some anachronisms are really easy to spot, others not so much. An example of an easy to spot anachronism would be, let's see, what's neat. Okay, so if I were to say to you that on his way to deliver the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln stopped at Taco Bell, you would all immediately recognize that as anachronistic because Taco Bell didn't exist in what was it? I think it was 1863 was the Gettysburg Address. It was some 1862, 1863. I'm pretty sure it was 1863. Point is, the Taco Bells did not exist at the time, so you would easily recognize that as an anachronism. Now, other anachronisms are a little more difficult to detect. For example, the idea that the supreme secret of a mystery religion had to do with the kind of drug that was used could only come from a culture, much like our own, where drugs are seen as taboo. Drugs were not seen as taboo in ancient Greece, like, at all. They didn't even have words for drug addict. Or alcoholic, for that matter. To believe that the ancient Greeks would have had some kind of taboo against drug use is an anachronism. It's not a palpably obvious one like the Abraham Lincoln example, but it's still an anachronism nonetheless. We today care about these things because we like psychedelics. Well, I like psychedelics. But the ancient Greeks had very different concerns than we have today. So when we say that the mystery of a mystery religion has anything at all to do with the kind of drug that was used, we are thinking anachronistically, and that is not okay for the historian, psychedelic or otherwise. Now, does that mean that the priests of the Rites of Eleusis wanted people to know what was in the kykeon? Oh, I highly doubt that. Still, that's not what an ancient mystery was. The second important thing we should say is that there really isn't any good evidence whatsoever that the kykeon was psychedelic or entheogenic at all. Again, I know that because of how culture moves and the way memes spread, we all take it as a given that ergot was used or that the kykeon had to have been psychedelic in some way, but there is literally no evidence for that at all. At this point, it's all just speculation, but that's okay. We can still do a lot of fun things and have some very interesting thoughts within that realm of speculation. Although we immediately hit a brick wall, and that brick wall has a name: the unread library effect. Although the name might be new to you, I guarantee you have encountered the unread library effect at some point in your life. The unread library effect results from having access to information or a close proximity to information, like books, libraries, archives, databases, Google, like whatever, and believing that because you have access to these knowledge bases, that you somehow understand the knowledge contained within these knowledge bases, even if you've never investigated them or read anything about them. You know what? Allow me to share with you a real-world example of the unread library effect that just so happens to pertain to our current discussion. Much as I enjoyed reading both The Road to Eleusis and The Immortality Key, it might surprise the casual reader to discover that the authors of both those books literally offer no evidence at all for ergot being used at Eleusis. Now, let me also say that I find that both those books have a tremendous amount of value besides that. I mean, they're both filled with facts and interesting things from history that we will all benefit from reading if we read those books. Like, no doubt about that. The thing is, what I find very interesting, and this is what pertains to the unread library effect, when I'm in conversation with someone and I'll say to them, oh, you know, like, we actually don't have any evidence that the kykeon was entheogenic in any way, that person will inevitably, I mean literally every single time, ask me if I've read The Immortality Key. To which I respond, yes, I have, but here's where the unread library effect comes into play. I will then ask the person who just asked me if I read the book, well, have you read the book? 100% of the time, the person has said, no, they haven't. Look, I get it. It's really, really cool to have a book on your shelf, but if you're not going to read it, might be best to not try to bluff those of us who have. And for those of you watching this thinking to yourselves, wait a minute, I read The Immortality Key, fuck this Tom Hatsis guy. Fair enough. But ask yourself this question. What was the best piece of evidence that Brian Muraresku put forth in that book? Like, what was the thing you read in that book that made you say, wow, he figured it out, ergot was absolutely used at Eleusis? Like, where is that anywhere in the book? Muraresku, and believe me, like, I love the guy as a friend and colleague, but he literally offers no evidence whatsoever. The best and closest Muraresku gets, and here I agree with him, is when he points out the findings of the archaeologist Jordi Tresserras, who was digging in an excavation site in Catalonia and did discover a cup that had ergot still like residue in it, and teeth from a skull that had ergot in it. And there, Brian and I are totally in agreement about that ergot was probably used in Catalonia. The issue here is that Catalonia is nowhere near Athens. Anyone who has done extensive traveling will understand this full well. Ergot in one area is no guarantee that ergot is found in another area. And that's not just ergot, that's literally everything in history. It's basically a correlation equals causation fallacy. More to the point, ergot is highly unstable. And while it was absolutely used in medicine, in magic, and witchcraft throughout the centuries, it was always done on an individual level. A physician tending to a patient, a wise woman tending to a client. Hundreds, if not thousands of people participated in the Rites of Eleusis every single year, and let's just say I'm very skeptical that, like, not one of those people came down with ergotism, or developed gangrene, or went into convulsions, or died. Like, no one? It just really doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, even modern medicine, with all our modern science that we have today, will still cause contraindications in one person with one medicine and not in another. That is either the greatest medical miracle of all of human history, or it's unlikely that the Athenians were using ergot. Now, in my own book, Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, I offer my own speculations about the kykeon. And this might be a good time to remind all of you that, again, we don't have any solid evidence whatsoever that the kykeon was entheogenic. However, there is another plant that was available in the ancient world, does not come with the same hazards that comes with ergot, was widely available in ancient Greece, and is highly psychoactive, meaning that in the right setting, the right context, it could produce an entheogenic experience. And that plant is opium. Believe it or not, unlike ergot, we actually have fantastic evidence that points to opium having some kind of association with the Rites of Eleusis. Now, the nature of that association, I'm not sure about. But let me show you what I'm talking about. We have a written account from Clement of Alexandria in which he claims cakes, pomegranates, a small statue of the vagina, and opium were all present in the kystai, which is the sacred box that held the sacred objects. So in the very least, because opium was found in the kystai, the ancient Athenians absolutely considered it sacred in some way. Additionally, opium residue was also found, along with some other natural products, in small cups that surrounded the kurna, a large bowl used in the ceremony. That is the kind of direct evidence that we do not have for ergot. Now again, that's not to say that opium was in the kykeon. It is to say that there is a relationship between opium and the Rites of Eleusis that just does not exist for ergot. Or take this carving of Persephone rising from the dead. She holds in her hands three things: snakes, wheat stalks, and opium. So here, we are already leagues away from any theory discussing ergot. I mean, we could literally see the opium carved in stone. There is also this telesterian relief, showing an opium flower. The telesterion was where the Rites of Eleusis took place. And what about this testimonial from Theocritus? For the Greeks, Demeter was still a poppy goddess, bearing sheaths and poppies in both hands. Y'all picking up what I'm putting down yet? Because that's not all. According to the Homeric hymn to Demeter, which is our only source for the rites in the ancient world, and I should say it's not a historical source, but it's a mythopoetic one. Anyway, according to the hymn, Persephone, Demeter's daughter, was strolling along the fields of Nysa when she plucked a flower called the narcissus. I find this interesting for two reasons. First, the narcissus takes Persephone into another world, the underworld, because Hades comes up from the underworld and seizes her. Second, we literally get our word narcotic from the word narcissus. And both Dioscorides and Plutarch write of the narcotic lethargy caused by the narcissus. Perhaps our best evidence for opium appearing at Eleusis comes from a much earlier source, one originating among the Minoans, specifically the opium goddess of the Minoan civilization. This opium goddess, or perhaps opium priestess, we're not really sure. Anyway, this opium woman statuette was found on the island of Crete in an underground cave next to a tubular vase used for smoking opium. So here's what I think happened. The ritual of going into a subterranean dwelling with one's opium statuette and a vase for smoking opium eventually migrated up north to Athens, where it expanded and grew to not include just a singular person, but hundreds of people. It is my contention that that ancient Minoan rite was what later evolved into the Rites of Eleusis. We today want the kykeon to have included LSD because we like LSD. Well, I like LSD. On the other paw, the United States and larger Western civilization is facing an opioid crisis. Therefore, the anachronistic argument would go, the ancient Greeks wouldn't possibly use opium for religious reasons because look at all the problems it's causing today. And LSD definitely opens your mind to the universe, the expanses of time and space, so obviously they were using that, right? Well, no, that is anachronistic. Why couldn't the ancient Greeks seek entheogenic experiences through opium? I mean, we know for a fact the ancient Minoans were. The truth is, we don't have any room for ergot at Eleusis. It simply doesn't fit the context of the rites or is found in any of the surviving artifacts pertaining to the rites. And saying, well, that's because it was a secret, it was part of the mystery, is very anachronistic thinking. We do, however, have room for opium present in the rites. It simply doesn't break the mythological structure of them. Quite the opposite, it all falls neatly into place. We have the Minoan legacy of worshipping the opium goddess through smoking opium as indicated by the archaeological finds on the island of Crete. We have the words of Theocritus who tells us that Demeter was always an opium goddess among the Greeks. And we have carvings of opium featuring with other aspects of the rites. Furthermore, the Rites of Eleusis were supposed to serve as a simulacrum, a mirror of Persephone's journey into the underworld for the initiates. So presume for a moment that the narcissus was the narcotic opium. Then would not the initiates have to take opium to mirror Persephone's descent into Hades? Now, I'm not saying that that's what happened. I am saying that that fits the evidence, well, what we have left, the surviving evidence, better than any spaghetti-on-the-wall theories about ergot. We have no evidence of any kind that points to ergot being used during the Rites of Eleusis besides the vain hopes of anachronistic thinkers who wish to rewrite people of the past into our modern likeness and image. Well, my friends, that's all I have for you this time, and I'd love to thank you for stopping by. If you found value in this content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the channel, and find me on Instagram. And until we meet again, I'm Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace.